You ever notice how everyone talks about marriage like it's the ultimate goal? But no one can really explain what problem it actually solves. For centuries, men have built their lives around it, worked for it, sacrificed for it, and most of them never stop to ask, what is this thing actually for? Because here's the truth. Marriage wasn't created for love. It was created for survival. Back then, the world was chaos. Life was short. Work was hard. And people needed each other just to make it through the week. A man needed a family to build legacy. A woman needed protection in a world with no laws, no safety, no rights. So marriage became the contract, the technology that turned survival into structure. It worked. For a long time, marriage solved the problem of chaos. It created order. It gave people a reason to stay. It turned two people into one unit, a strategy against the uncertainty of life. But here's what happened. The world changed, and the contract didn't. We built cities. We built systems. We built laws. We built rights. And slowly, the survival problem disappeared. Now, people don't need marriage to live. They need it to feel something, and that's where everything started to fall apart. See, love used to be a luxury. Now it's a job description. We tell people marriage will make them happy, complete, fulfilled. But that's a lie the modern world keeps selling because the truth doesn't sell well. The truth is, marriage never solved the problem of happiness. It solved the problem of instability. It was never about love stories. It was about safety nets. But today, we don't live in tribes. We live in systems. And those systems replaced most of the functions marriage once had. The law protects property. The government protects children. DNA tests define paternity. Economy provides independence. Technology replaces companionship. Everything marriage used to fix has already been outsourced. And yet, the idea of it still runs deep because we've been programmed to believe that love without marriage is incomplete. Society taught us that commitment isn't real unless it's witnessed by a crowd, that a promise only counts when it's signed on paper. That love without the law isn't valid, just temporary. But think about it. Since when did you need permission to love someone? Since when did the government become the authority over the human heart? Marriage used to make sense in a world where you couldn't trust anyone but your family. But now, the irony is, you trust strangers in court more than the person you marry. And maybe that's why so many men hesitate. Not because they hate women. Not because they fear love. But because they see the system for what it is, a contract that no longer matches the reality we live in. Here's the problem most people don't want to admit. Marriage doesn't make you better. It makes you responsible for someone else's emotions, someone else's expectations, someone else's interpretation of happiness. And when that happiness fades, so does the promise. In the old world, divorce was shameful. In this one, it's a reset button. So what problem does marriage really solve now? Not survival, not morality. Maybe just the fear of being alone, because that's what's left. Loneliness, the last real fear modern people have. We don't fear hunger anymore. We don't fear war the same way. We fear silence. We fear ourselves. So we call it love. We rush into contracts not because we need partnership, but because we can't sit alone with our thoughts. That's why people get married faster now and divorce even faster. Not because love is weaker, but because illusion is stronger. Marriage doesn't fail because people stop loving. It fails because people never understood why they were there in the first place. We keep trying to use an old solution for a new world. We're trying to fix emotional hunger with legal paperwork. We're trying to find meaning through status. We're chasing validation in the name of love. But no system legal, social, or romantic can fill the gap of self-awareness, because no matter what the vows say, you can't outsource peace of mind. You can't outsource emotional growth. You can't outsource purpose. And maybe that's what we've all forgotten. Marriage wasn't supposed to save us. It was supposed to remind us what we were already capable of: commitment, loyalty, patience, discipline. Those things still matter. But they don't need to be signed into law to be real. Because love is an act of choice, not compliance. And compliance is what kills it. So if you're sitting there, wondering if marriage will fix your loneliness, your emptiness, your fear, ask yourself this: what problem are you actually trying to solve? Because if the answer isn't love, then marriage will only make the problem worse. Here's what most people don't want to admit. The world evolved, but marriage didn't. The contract stayed the same, even after the conditions changed. Once, it was protection. Now, it's paperwork. Once, it was partnership. Now, it's performance. Once, it solved chaos. Now, it creates confusion. And deep down, we all know it, but we keep pretending we don't. Why? Because questioning marriage means questioning everything we were raised to believe. From the time we were kids, we were taught that marriage is the measure of success. You grow up, get a job, get married, and that's supposed to be the blueprint for a meaningful life. But meaning doesn't come from following the blueprint. It comes from building your own. See, in the modern world, men no longer need marriage to survive, but emotionally, they're still trained to see it as a reward, proof that they've made it. And women, they're taught that marriage is validation, proof that they're worthy. So both sides are chasing the same illusion, but for different reasons. He's chasing significance. She's chasing security. Neither is chasing truth, and that's why it all breaks. Because no legal contract can create what people refuse to build themselves: trust, growth, accountability. We call it love. But what we really mean is control. We want someone to fill our loneliness, to validate our value, to give structure to our chaos. And when they can't, we call it failure. But it's not failure. It's mislabeling. Marriage doesn't fix what's broken in you. It just mirrors it. If you're insecure, it amplifies it. If you're unhealed, it exposes it. If you're lost, it makes you feel trapped. Because the truth is, marriage never changes who you are. It just removes the distractions that kept you from seeing yourself. That's why so many men feel shock after getting married. They expected peace. But peace requires inner stability, not shared property. And so they start to feel something they can't explain, that quiet panic of realizing they traded freedom for familiarity. But it's not just men. Women feel it too. They thought commitment would mean safety, but safety without emotional connection turns into suffocation. So what happens? They start chasing what marriage was never designed to give: constant excitement, constant validation, constant happiness. And when it doesn't deliver, they say love died. But love didn't die. The illusion did. Here's the irony. The same society that tells you to get married is the one that rewards you when you leave. Because in the modern world, commitment isn't sacred. It's optional, temporary, conditional. We treat relationships like phone upgrades. If it doesn't fit, replace it. If it stops working, move on. If it gets hard, call it toxic. That's not evolution. That's avoidance. We're addicted to the idea of love, but allergic to the discipline it requires. That's why marriage feels outdated to so many men today. Not because they fear love, but because they understand its cost. You can't build something real when the system punishes you for trying. A man risks his finances, his home, his children, all in a structure that no longer protects him. And society tells him, be a man, commit. But what it really means is, take all the risk and none of the power. That's not love. That's leverage. And it's no surprise that men are waking up to it. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because when you realize the rules were written in a different era, you stop feeling guilty for playing a different game. You stop believing that commitment requires a ceremony. You stop thinking your love needs an audience. You start understanding that real commitment begins with self-respect. That's the modern shift no one talks about. Men aren't avoiding marriage because they hate women. They're avoiding it because they've learned to see beyond illusion. They no longer want to be praised for sacrifice. They want peace in exchange for effort. They don't need admiration. They need alignment. And deep down, most women want that too. But we're all trapped in the same illusion that the system itself guarantees love. It doesn't. It never did. Love is not a certificate. It's a discipline. It's not about ownership. It's about understanding. Marriage used to represent that discipline. Now it represents expectation, and expectation is the death of appreciation. So we go in with dreams and come out with documents. We go in with hope and come out with fear, and we call it normal. But here's what no one wants to hear. We've outgrown the structure, but not the story. We still crave belonging, but we no longer trust the system that promised it. So we create new rules, relationships without labels, commitment without contracts, connection without conditions, and people mock it. They say it's weak. They say it's lazy. But maybe it's not weakness. Maybe it's evolution. Because the truth is, you don't need a license to be loyal. You don't need validation to be devoted. You just need truth, the kind that doesn't need approval to exist. That's where men are headed now. Not away from love, but toward awareness. They're not escaping commitment. They're redefining it. And that's the part society refuses to understand, that freedom doesn't mean rejection of love. It means loving with open eyes. Not blind faith. That's what happens when the world changes. But the stories stay the same. The wise ones stop repeating the old scripts. They start writing their own. So here we are, a world where love still matters. But marriage doesn't mean what it used to. That's not a tragedy. That's evolution. Because maybe marriage was never broken. Maybe it just outlived the problem it was built to solve. It solved survival. It solved belonging. It solved legacy. But now, we live in a world where those things are choices, not necessities. So what problem does marriage actually solve today? Maybe none. Or maybe just one, the problem of illusion. Because marriage forces you to face who you are beneath the performance. It strips the fantasy, reveals the reality. And for most people, that's terrifying. We think marriage will save us from loneliness. But it doesn't. It just exposes it. We think it will make us better. But it doesn't. It just mirrors the parts we've ignored. That's why so many marriages fall apart, not because of betrayal, but because of clarity. Love without self-awareness always collapses. And marriage, at its core, is love under pressure. It's supposed to refine you, not define you. But modern society flipped the script. We turned marriage from a practice into a product. We buy rings, plan ceremonies, post pictures, and call that commitment. But commitment isn't what happens in public. It's what survives in private. It's not two people saying I do. It's two people saying I still will. Every day, when no one's watching. That's the truth most people miss. Marriage doesn't solve your loneliness, your fear, or your pain. It only magnifies what was already there. That's why it's dangerous to treat it like therapy. Because it was never designed to fix you. It was designed to reveal you. And that's not a flaw. That's the gift. Because only through reflection can we become who we were meant to be. So what's the alternative? What's the modern solution? It's not abandoning love. It's upgrading it. It's two people choosing honesty over obligation, clarity over ceremony, purpose over performance. It's understanding that real partnership doesn't require a witness, it requires awareness. Because the truth is, you don't need marriage to be loyal. You don't need a title to be trustworthy. You don't need a contract to be consistent. You just need two people who understand that love is not a feeling. It's a daily act of discipline. You see, the world doesn't need more weddings. It needs more wisdom. Because love is easy. Understanding is rare. Anyone can say forever. Few can mean it. And even fewer can live it. So when people ask, what problem does marriage actually solve? The real answer might surprise them. Marriage doesn't solve a problem. It reveals one, the human need to be seen, to be validated, to be understood. And until we learn to give those things to ourselves, no partnership will ever feel enough. That's why the wisest men don't run from love. They refine it. They don't escape commitment. They redefine it. They know peace doesn't come from avoiding connection, but from choosing it consciously without illusion, without dependency, without fear. Because the truth is, freedom and love were never enemies. They just require balance. Freedom without love is emptiness. Love without freedom is prison. The secret is to build something that honors both. That's what modern love should look like, not a cage, not a competition, but a collaboration between two people who have already built themselves first. The strongest relationships are not built on need, but on choice, not on fear, but on respect. You can't share peace until you have it. You can't offer love until you understand it. You can't promise forever until you've made peace with who you are today. That's the real work. That's the only problem worth solving. Marriage was designed for a world where people didn't know how to be alone. But if you can master solitude, you no longer marry out of fear. You marry out of abundance. And that changes everything. You stop seeing marriage as a rescue mission. You start seeing it as a partnership between equals. Not I need you, but I choose you. Because that's what love was always meant to be, not dependency, but direction. Not salvation, but synergy. So, what problem does marriage solve now? Maybe none for society. But for the individual, it can still solve one thing: the problem of illusion. When it's real, it strips away what's false. It humbles you. It tests you. And it teaches you the one lesson most people spend a lifetime avoiding: that love doesn't fix you. It reveals if you were ever whole to begin with. That's the truth no one wants to admit, because it's easier to chase the fantasy than to face the mirror. But men who understand this don't fear love anymore. They just respect it. They don't need to be saved by marriage. They build a life so complete that marriage becomes a reflection of peace, not a replacement for it. That's what maturity looks like. Not running from the old system, but outgrowing it. So maybe the real answer to the question is simple. Marriage doesn't solve problems anymore. It exposes them. And that's not a reason to avoid it. It's a reason to be ready for it. Because love is still worth it when you enter it with truth instead of illusion. And that's when marriage becomes what it was always meant to be, not a cage, not a cure, but a choice made by two people who no longer need saving.